Hey, it's David with the Freeze Dry Business and the Frozen Assets podcast series, where we focus on everything freeze drying and freeze drying entrepreneurship. Today, if you're interested in freeze drying or wanting to know more about what's happening in the freeze drying industry, well, this interview that I'm going to share with you today is with the owner of Foodynamics. This company is based in Wisconsin, and they have several commercial freeze dryers that they rent out to hundreds of people who want to freeze dry different types of recipes. They really help people basically take their business and their recipe to the next level. And you're going to hear from Sean Jones, who started a freeze-dried pet company using countertop branded freeze dryers, just like we all use today, and then grew his company to fill the needs of people who are looking at accelerating their freeze drying business. So if you don't want to watch the whole video or you don't have time, I've got timestamps below in the video description. If you want to reach out to Sean and talk to him about what he has to offer through co-packing and helping you grow your freeze drying business, I'm going to put his contact information below in the video description as well. Now let's get to the interview with Sean Jones of Foodynamics. Sean, tell me a little bit about what your company is, because I think you manufacture some freeze-dried product, but you also do some food and some white labeling for people who want to get into pet food. So tell us a little bit about what Foodynamics is about.
We own two brick and mortar pet supply stores called What's in the Bowl Pet Shop. We had a couple Harvest Right freeze dryers in the back room from the beginning that we were freeze drying treats for cats and dogs and selling them in our store. And we had a few brands that came in, and some owners of big brands came in and said, could you do some research for us on products? Because most of the bigger freeze drying companies have a lot of MOQs. And we were like, sure, we're science geeks. So we did some research for them, freeze dry some stuff. And then our business really started to grow because we said we could start freeze drying for you. And our Foodynamics spun off of What's in the Bowl. We actually started out as Raw Dog Barkery, which is one of our brands. We changed our name to Foodynamics because we started to private label for about 250 companies now. We also got duped a couple times by suppliers. We started sourcing products from grocery stores and graduated to Sam's Club and the club stores, and then to Restaurant Depot. Now we work with brokers from all over the United States and order tens of thousands of pounds of meat every week. We started out with lots of Harvest Right freeze dryers, and we were up to, I think, 30 at one time. That's when we graduated to a Parker. And now we're producing in a day what used to take us a year. It was a great journey and a phenomenal way to start a business. We really swear by starting small, proving the concept, and then taking that big entrepreneurial leap.
This is interesting because there's a lot of avenues for revenue to be captured with freeze drying. You can make your own product, rent it out, and private label like you're doing, or do the whole production. So I want to better understand, Sean, for people that are listening, what is private labeling? Because it's very common across a lot of other different industries. But what does private labeling mean, and how is that being done on the freeze drying side?
Private label is one of the things that we didn't realize right away is that many of the brands that we really admire and had up on pedestals actually don't make a thing themselves. They use what are called co-packagers or co-manufacturers to do all of the production for them. It might be their recipe, it might be their formula, but it's all done. And the reason why private label exists, and I'll give you an example, the facility that we have now, we own one small brand. There's no way that we could support the facility that we have now with just one brand. And we even see that in the pet industry, even in the toothbrush industry. We went to the Private Label Expo in Chicago last year, and we discovered that there's really only two places in the world where toothbrushes are made. Chances are when you buy a toothbrush at Target or Walmart or Walgreens, they all came from the same place. It may have been that brand's or that company's design, but they were still manufactured by somebody else. There's some large pet food manufacturers around us here. They manufacture 20 other brands in the same facility. The reason for that is there's no way, even if we had a brand in every pet store in the world, that we could support this facility without making other brands as well. We sign non-disclosure statements with all the brands we make things for. A lot of them are proprietary formulas. Some of them, they're delivered to us and we freeze dry them. We just verify the ingredient sources, but we really don't know the secret sauce.
Yeah.
We're the freeze drying company. And we've got a lot of inquiries about people that want survival food done or freeze-dried apples for snacks or candy. And we haven't moved in that direction. We're about to do another expansion. And that is definitely something that we'll be able to offer in the next years.
So, Sean, I want to dive into a little bit more of the private label because this is really fascinating. Someone who has their own homemade recipe for pet food that they've been doing for a long period of time, or maybe they actually have a recipe. Walk us through, what do I do if I'm wanting to get this done by somebody else and test it out and then manufacture it because I know that it's going to explode and create a business for me? What does it actually look like contacting you?
And we get that a lot. The first thing that people need to realize is that the recipe for a complete and balanced meal for freeze dried is going to be a little different than if they were just making it fresh in their home. Because of the minimal nutritional loss during the freeze drying process, you do have to account for that in your freeze dried recipe. Help walk through the process of that food formulation. We charge a nominal fee for it. Once they have their recipe, we're still a small company, so we don't have any minimum quantity requirements. So they can share the recipe with us. We'll sign a non-disclosure statement. We'll talk to them about the process and make the food and put them on our production schedule. We let them know the costs. These are the ingredients in my product. I want to make this many pounds of food. And then we're able to tell them not only that if it's a complete diet, how much it would cost per pound to make, plus a freeze drying fee. We operate pretty quickly. Once it's on the production schedule, we'll make the food, we'll refreeze it, pan it, and then it'll go into our freeze dryer. When it comes out, we can do two things. We can send it back in bulk. We can actually package it for you, and we work with design teams to design packaging and send it wherever you want it to be sent. And we also can do fulfillment for people too. We have fulfillment partners. If they were going to start selling it online, we can do that too.
Awesome. So it's like a drop and ship type of point in sale. So if I'm in Idaho, which I am, I could say, hey, here's my recipe. Can you give me a quote for doing all of it, from taking the recipe and making that actual product, putting it in the freeze dryer, freeze drying it, ensuring that it has all the types of testing for nutrition and everything that you would need to actually put on a label to sell it as a pet food. And then you also offer services for packaging it up, designing that package. And if they didn't want to do it themselves, you could find a way to ship it and they don't even have to handle the inventory. That's a full service type of suite. That's great.
And the way we do that is similar to our specialty is freeze drying. We partner with a 3PL fulfillment center. They fulfill for Amazon and Chewy and other smaller companies as well. That all inch into your margin of how much you would make on the product, because there's always an extra fee for every service. People starting out will opt to do their packaging themselves because it just makes it cheaper. If some people actually, they'll provide us they'll say, okay, can you source chicken hearts for us? Can you freeze dry chicken hearts for us and send them in bulk? Even if they're doing their own freeze drying, they may have customers or just the need to more. Usually we can say, if you have a couple Harvest Right freeze dryers, we know what the output of that is. We can ship them.
Now, it seems like if you're going to go this route using Foodynamics to be your co-packer and private label this, is there a minimum type of pounds of production and freeze dried product that you're generally seeing with all the different brands that you work with, that they need to have kind of a delivery point of, hey, I've got all these clients waiting for this type of demand, versus somebody who's just starting out? Where do generally your clients land in that spectrum?
We have a broad spectrum of clients. We have clients that have pet food in every single independent pet store in the country. We have people that don't have their formula yet. They're just dipping their toe. Minimums, if they're just wanting to do treats, or even if it was a minimally processed recipe where it was just a few ingredients and we were making a supplement or a treat for someone, we're very dedicated to small businesses because that's how we started. And we don't have any minimum orders for things like that. If someone said, I want 10 pounds of this, we would do 10 pounds. If they said, we want to do a test market of this, we're limited in our facility we can maybe make 500 pounds at a time raw material, but we also have a partner nearby and their minimum is 6,000 pounds. That would end up being probably around 1,500 pounds of freeze-dried product. Some of our competitors or some of the companies that we compete with, Their minimums are 20,000 pounds of finished freeze-dried weight.
Wow. That's amazing.
To be in this lane of really, and that we enjoy the most is working with new entrepreneurs. I helped someone incorporate their LLC earlier this week. We love doing that. No matter how much growth we would experience, that would ever change for us.
Yeah. And so maybe going back to the private label evolution of your business, you said you had two original brands that you were freeze drying. How did you see this opportunity saying, you know what, the opportunity for freeze drying for us, we see as being an actual co-packer? How did you know to kind of go about that? Because I know that there's large freeze dryer co-packers anyway. How did you figure out your niche to go into this side of things?
Because we were the ones contacting another company to make it for us, we ran into two things. The ones we really wanted to work with were at full capacity or had some minimum order requirements. We could have bought a large Parker freeze dryer for what their minimum was. There's private label or co-manufacturers with capacity. It wasn't at the quality that we were expecting. The pet industry, you could call something human grade, and that means it was scraped out of a drain in a human facility. And this is just us, we're very to the quality of the product and the traceability of the products that we allow in our facility. We just saw the opportunity in the market and backed into how much we would need to produce to be competitive in the market, and that led us to, we need to make this for other people. We knew we had enough contacts in the industry to start up and do just fine. There's incredible demand in freeze drying anything. I don't think we're in the infancy of the consumer understanding what freeze drying is. So I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people ask me, where are we at in the trends of the industry? I would say everyone's freeze drying candy. There's a lot of other industries that are not even starting to birth and become an actual consumer recognizable freeze dried product. Pet food's been one of those that has been around, but now everyone's taking their existing wet type pet food and now freeze drying it. So it creates a whole other sector of their product line, which is another revenue source as well. So what would you say though, looking at your previous brands that you had yourself and then looking and saying, we need to be able to scale, how does somebody know whether they're supposed to maybe look at co-packing and doing it versus keeping on their same track of buying their own freeze dryers and doing it all themselves? Are there pros and cons? Can you explain what the differences might be between having your own freeze dryers versus having someone do it for you?
Absolutely. One of the things that we discovered is we haven't invested a lot in promoting our brands. Reason for that is marketing and bringing a brand to market is a completely different process. Sometimes companies decide, do I want to create a brand, and is my specialty going to be marketing and selling and finding distributors and going to trade shows, or am I going to be a manufacturing facility? It's a completely different business process. You have to decide where you really want to go. It is difficult to do both. If you look deep in the pet industry, there aren't that many brands out there that manufacture their own products. A lot of the brands, if you look deep enough, you realize some of them don't even have an office. All of their employees, including the owner or the CEO, work from home, and there's not an address anywhere. I think it's kind of genius. And then there's that balance of, okay, we're going to have some things co-manufactured and we're going to stay in our lane and do what we specialize in. To do that, we decided we're going to stop doing that. There's other companies that can do that at scale. That's not what we wanted to do. We didn't have the space for it, although it's a similar process. It's something we decided we weren't going to do. We're going to specialize in freeze drying. Are we going to focus a lot on bringing our own brands to market? Absolutely not. That's not our skill set. Sometimes people ask me, why don't you push your brand? If you go to some of the major trade shows like Super Zoo or the Global Pet Expo every year, it's 300,000 square feet of pet products. And I always say, imagine holding my brand in the palm of my hand and say, I'm going to beat out all these other people. That's not in my wheelhouse, but if you're really good at marketing and really good at bringing a brand to market, that's your niche. That's your strategic decision to do. We made the decision to go into manufacturing, and sometimes we question our decisions, but because it has completely different challenges.
Yeah,
I do think manufacturing has predictable return. because you could spend a lot of money on marketing and sales.
One of the things I look at when I take a look at the forecast of the freeze drying industry, how do you earn money with a freeze dryer? You can be a small business and process everything yourself, just doing things that are more localized. You can also develop a brand that's more state focused and recognized as the freeze drying company of for your own state. You can then go out to your region. You can then go to the different targets of different audiences. And I think also renting or being a manufacturer of freeze drying product, there's a huge demand for that. And so if you have lulls in your freeze drying production and you just don't have that demand yet, you can also be licensed to co-pack and help people out in that sense. I think there's huge demand for that for sure. Sean, I want to ask you just a little bit about the process for freeze drying pet food. I'm a little bit more unfamiliar with the benefits to freeze drying pet food specifically. Can you tell us in layman's terms, what is freeze drying pet food's purpose? What are the benefits? And why is it something that big, huge global companies are investing in? Why is that the case?
In the pet industry, we've all seen the commercials recently for like Farmer's Dog and Fresh Pet. There's a shift in the pet industry to feed more real food or real fresh food. The best way to preserve food is going to be freeze drying. Pet industry, not unlike the human industry, convenience is really driving consumers' decisions that I need something that's shelf stable, something that is going to be better than something I would buy out of one of the big bags. I know is ultra processed. When I always say found the worst physician on the planet, they would tell all of us to eat more real whole foods and less processed foods. And the same is happening in the pet industry. So you very rarely see really junky or processed foods being freeze dried. It's usually quality food being freeze dried, and that's what the market's demanding. It's the fastest growing segment in the pet industry. So most of it is driven by the shelf stable quality food. It's a little bit of a deterrent because it literally doubles the price, but for the convenience of being able to have this really high quality food on your shelf that could be there for a really long time.
So, Sean, I want to ask you about the types of animals you're seeing freeze-dried pet food come to market. Dogs and cats come to mind, right? But there's a lot of other animals, horses, guinea pigs, snakes, all types of reptiles. So what are you seeing come to market that you can tell us about?
We're seeing increased demand in the small animal sector, those guinea pigs and reptiles. And we get a lot of requests to freeze-dry cockroaches, black soldier fly larvae, to freeze dry crickets and that type of thing. And now AFCO, it's not a government organization, but the closest thing they've approved insects as a pet food for cats and dogs. Freeze dry carrots for horse treats. The interesting things is we've been freeze drying minnows for 9 years. It never occurred to me, but we had someone say, hey, could we use that as bait? Absolutely. You could keep in your tackle box for 20 years and it'd be fine. There's all these, I think, discoveries happening where you freeze drying as an option. Cost is always an issue, but I think we've scratched the surface on freeze dried, especially for animals outside of cats and dogs in the pet industry.
Yeah. I actually, it's funny you mentioned about the fishing side for bait because I've been in freeze drying for probably 4 or 5 years now. One of the things I thought about with fishing was I did find a Asian company that was making fish food like cubes. And it's like you sprinkle flakes on your fish tank, but they were creating cubes. It was more concentrated and it slowly dissolves in the fish tank, which I thought was brilliant. But the second thing I thought was building off of the cube. I thought it'd be really unique if somebody could build like a 3D printed box that has different vent holes. And you literally put freeze dried product in there because if it becomes a powder, it could just expand. So thinking of fishing, if you cast out that little box with freeze dried fish type bait, it would slowly leak out of those holes, therefore attracting the fish in. And I thought that would just be a very interesting invention that somebody could do. It's a wide variety of products.
And I think there's still opportunity for innovation. And I still hope that on the human side, something happens in the industry that makes freeze drying, so all the consumers know what freeze drying is. It's going to change everything. The consumer realizes that something is freeze dried.
Yeah.
Big
And
process, isn't it big?
I think once the consumer is familiar with what a freeze dried product or what that process is, and it's more widespread, then you're going to see a lot more brands not even call themselves a freeze dried company. It's just going to be you're going to have a product that is freeze dried, and that process is how they're making the product that then they go to market with. So I think freeze dried as an industry name, like Kleenexes to tissue paper, that's what freeze drying is going to be known as. But you're going to see all these branch offs of people creating different things, something else, but it's going to be a freeze dried product.
I think about astronaut ice cream all the time. People know what that is, but they don't realize it's a freeze dried product.
Freeze dried is very popular because people are using freeze dryers to make candy pop. There could be a different term for freeze dried candy in that it could be popped candy, it could be crunch candy, something like that, that is now an industry known term that what am I eating? Oh, I'm eating a popped candy. That could be anything. Yeah. So Sean, now you're in Wisconsin and you had some Harvest Right freeze dryers that you said you had close to what, 30 of these freeze dryers. So then you bought a Parker freeze dry, which is a commercial freeze dryer. Walk us through your evolution of the machines that you worked through, pros and cons, and what are the benefits that you saw throughout your process to eventually getting more of a commercial freeze dryer?
That's a really important question because if we were starting the process now, there's so many other options that didn't exist when we were at that point of, okay, we really need to scale this. Freeze dryers, even Harvest Right coming out with their extra large and their large commercial one, that those weren't options. And along that scale, we were like, okay, at that point, it was like, we can't buy any more Harvest Right freeze dryers. It just takes so long to fill them all. And then labor, we weren't going to be competitive on that. When we started to look for co-manufacturers, we really knew we wanted to grow. At one point with the Harvest Rights, we started to have some maintenance issues and reliability issues because ours literally ran 24/7. 24/7. It was like if that defrost cycle was completed at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was there refilling it. That's where our best margin was. There's that process of figuring out at what point you can support more of a robust freeze drying system, or do you use a co-manufacturer? You just don't want to not have a strategy. We've now invested millions of dollars into our facility. It's a huge leap, and I'm at a point in my life where I should be planning a lot closer for retirement than taking these risks. Wife is a saint, an angel. Looking at this freeze drying industry, we're like, could I have 50% of the capacity of that freeze dryer filled before it's even installed? And that's, we've been able to do that. Our current Parker 6 freeze dryer is at near capacity right now. And we're at that point where we're looking at the science of the freeze drying because the Parker freeze dryer, you can really change the settings in it. And every single run that we do in it, there's a big difference between a commercial freeze dryer and a harvest dryer. Our freeze dryer not only has more capacity, it also freeze dries faster, more than twice as fast. We are literally looking at, can we shave 10 minutes off in this protein to get that extra 10 minutes out of the machine? And we celebrate every single efficiency that we create by modifying our recipe. So it's like any manufacturing machine, whether you're making widgets or freeze-dried products, you're constantly looking at how to maximize this very expensive capital expenditure. If the Parker Summit had existed, and we were at that point, we would have jumped on that in a second. It was a little bit of a stretch to go to a Parker 2, which is like a 2-cart system, because that's expensive, and yet there was nice to have that medium ground to use. And one of the things that the selling point for us was just hey, this can freeze dry twice as fast as the Harvest Right. So that's how we produce more in one day than we did in a year.
I think you're a great person to ask because I get it asked quite a bit across a lot of people who are in large freeze drying operations. They have a lot of Harvest Rights, just like you were, but they're having that struggle with how do I justify purchasing an $85,000 Summit or a $150,000 Parker 2, whatever those costs are. It seems very intimidating versus you divide 85,000 by 5,000, which is the XL, and you have what is that, 15 or so Harvest Right freeze dryers. So it's like, how did you justify those things? Did it take a while? What can you talk to us about that?
The way we decided to make the leap is we really knew our costs were big. We were able to drill down on what are our costs, including not just the cost of our freeze dryers. We knew what the electrical required. We know what the cost of our products are. We know what our labor cost was. We went on our rent, our insurance, basically taking all that information in and then forecasting. So if we had this amount of business and this is the revenue that we'd be able to generate, we'd be able to generate this amount of freeze dried product and we would be able to sell it. It's sometimes really basic. It says your operating expenses minus what you would sell your product for. And you say, I need this much business to support a payment on a larger freeze dryer. We didn't do that analysis soon enough. If we had, we might have moved to that Parker 2 pretty quickly. But by the time we did the analysis, we were confident with the Parker 6. Now, I can tell you the challenge we have now is we have a Parker 6. Our next machine is going to be a Parker 10R. We're ready to do that right now. We've scaled most of our operations as if we had not only our Parker 6, but we're ready to have 2 Parker 10Rs. In addition to that, so we have all the overhead expenses of a 14,000 square foot facility. We have room in our facility for 2 or 3 more Parker 10Rs, but so we're incurring those expenses, although we don't have the revenue to support it. So it's a real struggle. Very lucky I have another business that is able to fund our expansion. Or if you get a big enough loan, it's scary. We're fortunate that we're freeze drying. You're fortunate you're in a business that there's high demand. Our Parker 10R, by the time it's installed, we'll have 75% of the capacity filled, pre-orders.
Yeah. And you said a facility down the road also has some freeze dryers that can do those things too. For someone listening to this and saying, okay, I've ran my numbers, but I'm still only at 50% capacity of getting a commercial freeze dryer, look at the amount of demand that large companies are looking to fulfill orders. Like freeze drying is popular and demand enough, not just in the US, but globally, that you can fill those types of gaps and be your own co-packer in the interim while you're building up your own demand for your own brand.
You're spot on. Fill the gap.
Yeah. I talk about the difference between a Harvest Right and other brands of home freeze dryers. There's a lot of credit to be given to Harvest Right 10 years ago, who basically built the technology and sophistication of a freeze drying process with the condenser and the vacuum and everything, and said, we're going to make it the size of a mini fridge and make it affordable for people to put in their homes. That was amazing. What they didn't intend, I guarantee you, is the amount of people that would use their home freeze dryers 24/7 operations for a business. That's not how they created that. Naturally, you're going to have maintenance issues. There's a lot of maintenance that goes on with running an appliance like that 24/7. But there's always been these larger commercial grade companies that have been building freeze dryers for pharmaceutical, the marijuana industry, the pet food industry for years before Harvest Right. And that's what they're actually focused on. And I think if you're a company trying to scale your freeze dried product, you've got to look at commercial freeze dryers. It's just not scalable for you to have 30 to 50 home freeze dryers. The amount of cleaning of those trays, the amount of maintenance, the amount of pump oil changes, it's just not doable.
People underestimate the energy consumption of those small freeze dryers. For a while, when we did the transition from 30 to our Parker 6, we didn't see look at it this way. The 30 freeze dryers that we have were consuming close to what a commercial freeze dryer would do with 1,000 times the capacity.
So you don't have to have 30 different dedicated 20 amp circuits to run these freeze dryers. You just need one power source to run this commercial freeze dryer. Sean, I've got another question for you, more on the operational side, food safety for pets as well. It's a highly regulated sector, and having FDA regulation to scale your business is a big expense and complicated. Can you walk us through the pet food side? Is it more regulated than human consumption? What does the FDA look for if you're starting to look into this? How can it be less intimidating for someone looking into going to into this space?
The fortunate and unfortunate part pet food is the FDA. Actually, there's no government entity that oversees pet food. There's no legislation. FDA, the USDA, involved if something bad happens. Unfortunate part of that is because there's not any specific legislation, when they get involved, you don't know what you're dealing with because it's based on that individual inspector or whoever is doing the enforcement, because it becomes arbitrary. So you really don't know. You don't know what the law is. You don't know because there is no law. So they know some harm came to someone. So it's a Wild West industry. But on the other hand, we encourage the things that helps us draw in customers, hired a consultant right away, and we're going beyond what the FDA would require. We're actually working on our certification, which is like one of the highest standards you can do for food safety. Rather than being intimidated by it, in the pet industry, your food safety operations need to be the same as a restaurant. If anybody can achieve that, most of us, when we make stuff in our home, we're going to meet those standards. So you're just following a written standard. Even if you're doing a small freeze drying business, go to a local technical college and take a HACCP. So basically, the food sanitation course. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not even $100 to take. I don't think it's something to be intimidated by. I think even if you did it and you didn't plan on really scaling a large business, it would make what you're cooking at home safer.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of things that we don't realize that we should be doing at home. Like the FDA doesn't even recommend that you wash a chicken in your sink because you're going to spread contaminants rather than prevent them. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah. And I think you have to understand restaurants can run underneath, like in really poor food safety conditions, but they're still open. They're only going to get shut down if they have enough points stocked when they have that health inspection. So their food can be really good, but they also can have high susceptibility to getting someone sick. As a consumer, you might be really concerned with that. Other consumers might be like, I've been to East Asia, I've had great Vietnamese food, and I'm okay with it being cooked in something that hasn't been washed every single time it's been changed out. So it's like the consumer side is like, hey, some people are going to be concerned with food safety, other people are not. And then on the regulation side, the FDA isn't going to come to your location every single day in certain situations. And so it's really up to you of what type of standards are you going to hold your company to. Nice for what you're offering in terms of services for being a private label company is you have those types of regulations already done. Somebody else doesn't have to go through that process. Is that right?
Yeah, they don't have to. It's all transferable through being a co-packer. We're more hyper vigilant in our safety standards. Any raw products or frozen products delivered to our facility, I require the traceability to tell the temperature of every single truck that product's been transported. We require that level of transparency and traceability of the products that we allow in our facility. We actually stopped making certain products because suppliers weren't able to meet those standards. That's how I sleep at night. Otherwise, you have to start lot coding everything. That little lot code that's printed on every single package that leaves here, we could literally trace back to probably when it
Yeah.
was picked up at a farm.
I see a lot of benefits to having a co-packer because if you see these larger global companies, it's, hey, I don't have to go and do these things because somebody else is doing it for me. That's brilliant. I wanted to ask you.
This is an important note. My wife gets on me all the time about, I'll tell everybody exactly how we do everything. And she's like, why do you do that? You're going to lose customers. I was like, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. I'll stand right shoulder with you and help you do it.
For Skittles, a lot of people have been freeze drying Skittles. I know that Mars Wrigley is going to make their own freeze dried Skittle because they have the source to the product. But I guarantee you that they're going to be finding a co-packer to make those freeze dried Skittles. They're not going to go and have to develop their own facility, new expenses in that end, have to figure out the right temperature, recipe, packaging, all that type of stuff for a brand new product. They're going to just find out how to do it consistently at the same time, how to brand it, how to trademark it, which they're really good at. and then they're going to find someone to do it for them. You got to find the different avenues, but it can be really fun to do your own processing too.
And that's how Mars, and probably every company should start. Even a company as big as Mars, they're one of the largest companies in the world. How they'll start, and then if it's a big hit, they'll just buy the co-packer.
Yeah. And that would be a huge payday for that co-packer.
But that's how they do things. If you really wanted to test the waters, see if you can scale your business and you're really good at marketing and sales, get a co-packer. And your co-packer isn't going to be mad at you if you decide to develop your own facility.
Yep.
If you're mad about that, you shouldn't be in the business because you're going to be upset 24/7.
Considering the fact that you have several hundred clients already that are different brands, there's enough demand and you don't have to worry about that. Sean, if you can think of a couple opportunities within the freeze drying space for people just starting out, maybe you have that marketing mindset, are there opportunities you could tell us that you're seeing that people should start exploring or doing some research about, whether it's food, pet food, maybe it's not even food related, that you've been seeing pop up as you've been in this industry this long?
I could tell you if you're already freeze drying, and I think a lot of people will freeze dry products. They might even sell them at farmers markets. Then you have the cottage industry that protects you from having to have that FDA inspection and everything. And the same goes for pet food. If you're already freeze drying, I would freeze dry some pet treats and take them to the farmers market. I always look at market segments, and it was like, you have a pretty good chance that people like apples, so they're like freeze dried apples. But I always say in this industry, you have a 70% chance whether the people at the farmers market have a cat or a dog. That you have a better chance they might buy a pet product than freeze dried apples because you can get apples everywhere. I think there's tremendous opportunity to make pet treats, and how do you make them? Meat. It could be hearts, it could be liver, it could be chicken breast. Dogs and cats are carnivores, so you stick with meat. Can they eat apples? Absolutely, they love them. Put them in a bag and call them for dogs. I think they're great opportunity in the pet industry. There's great opportunity for supplements. I watch commercials all the time that they sell 30 grams of freeze-dried fruits and vegetables for $50 and it would cost me 25 cents to make. I think that's genius. I guarantee they're having a co-packer make those for them, and therefore they're a sales and marketing company. I think there's those opportunities to take a freeze-dried product and package it however you want. I think the most important thing to realize is there's a skill of being a manufacturer and making food. It's like a chef might be able to create these amazing recipes in the food, but they might not be very good at running a restaurant. They're just different skill sets and different requirements. If you're really good at freeze drying stuff and really innovative and everything, and then somebody is really good at graphic design and really good at advertising and marketing and sales, maybe that's a good partnership.
I think about a lot of the younger generation that really understands social media and TikTok specifically. If you really understand how to pull people in and purchase a product through that type of channel, you don't need to go and purchase freeze dryers. Maybe you need to purchase a couple to test out different products. Maybe that's more for presentation wise for selling it, but you can use a co-packer to say, hey, you produce me this and I can sell anything. And I know how to do that through my social media tactics, my strategies, and my expertise. Same thing goes for trade shows. People are really good at being able to sell large distributors a new product and sell it for you. Look at your strengths, weaknesses, and passion. Do you like producing product? Because if you like it, like you do and your wife, I really have fun making different products for different people and even myself. But then you're going to have to outsource the marketing and the advertising because maybe you're just not very skilled with that.
Absolutely. One of the things we offer to all of our customers, if they want to come to our facility, we'll put them in a white coat and a hard hat, and we can take pictures and video of them making the products so they can tell that story and make freeze-dried pet food. Not back there every day anymore, cutting meat and putting it in the freeze dryer. We have a team doing that. I think telling that story, and I think it's also helpful to be able to sell it, to be able to say, you know what, this is product, this is how it's sourced, this is how it's made. These are the food safety standards we have in place because it's really important to us. From a consumer, you get the question, consumers aren't asking that question. They assume everybody is making their own stuff.
I think they just care about where they're sourcing it from. Hey, is it US made? Is it exported? Some people care about that. I see freeze dried products selling for a 99 cents at Walmart. And some people are going to, that whole demographics for people that shop at Walmart are going to buy the cheapest stuff. They're not going to buy something for $10 an ounce. But there are people that are going to buy the fruit from $10 an ounce because they know that you're freeze drying organic produce, or maybe you're not adding any sugars or ingredients, and it's US made.
One of our customers was so important that they actually flew from each coast, one from California, one from New York, and we met them at a farm and spent the entire day with this family, finding their sources and understanding how these animals were raised, because on their website they're going to have pictures of them on that farm. They're going to have descriptions of how these animals were raised. That's really important. And it's really important to us. We're making the product. We connected them with the farm, but it's their brand. That is their mission. And that's what we love about being the co-packer. We get to travel all over the place, verify our sources. We meet a lot of amazing people that is really important to. Are they making it? No.
Yeah.
They know every single aspect of how it's made, how it's sourced, and the food safety. They know the material the packaging is made out of.
Now, outside of the links in my video description for this interview, where do people find you and start digging into more about your services, and if they feel inspired? Where can they contact you?
They can find us on our website at foodynamics.com. It is the best way to remember it is Foodynamics because it's Food Dynamics with one D. The domain name with two Ds was like $27,000, and Foodynamics with one D was $11. So that's how we made that decision. But
there you go.
We like the play on words of the Foodynamics type thing. So foodynamics.com. Brand is Raw Dog Barkery, so all one word, rawdogbarkery.com. And our trade shows, we usually go to Super Zoo in Las Vegas in August. And in March, it's the Global Pet Expo in Orlando, the Pet Food Forum in Kansas City in March, or April this year. Well, probably next year we'll probably be at a lot more trade shows, but if anyone ever has any questions, we're really more than willing to answer. We're transparent on everything we do.
It's been awesome to talk to you, Sean. We've been talking with Sean Jones, owner of Foodynamics Private Labeling. If you're interested in taking your recipe or something that you're thinking about, you can give them a call, contact them via email to their website. And from what they have, all the brands that they work with, they can do any type of service that you're looking for on the freeze drying side to get this all to fruition and seeing your product come to life.